But the other day, 60,000 views in one day. Roland Martin sat down with Vice President Kamala Harris to talk about her agenda in black men or for black men. And so again, yes, I've voted for Claudia and Karina, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm still a member of the Green Party, and would be more than happy to watch, participate in, maybe not participate in, host maybe debates about which of those should get anyone's vote. But so I acknowledge I'm not supporting Kamala, I'm not supporting Trump, I'm not supporting that form of engagement with electoral politics. That bias aside, what is target much like when it comes to buying power and how economics are reported to black audiences, politics are being reported in almost the same way. That is, what is good for advertisers and what is good for the ideology of a mainstream commercial outlet, or what must be the ideological constraints of a mainstream corporate commercial outlet. The results are basically the same. The political reporting is just as bad and biased and poorly sourced and referenced and et cetera, and just becomes a cheerleader for, in this case, Kamala Harris. In the same way, these so-called buying power reports just become cheerleading for advertising and marketing, ultimately all of which are basically the same. All right, so I just want to play this little bit of an exchange here, and yeah.
Madam Vice President,
Roland
glad to have you here. Ready to bring the funk?
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Let's get right to it. So right before I walked out there, someone posted a clip, and usually the clip, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do anything specifically for African Americans. But folk don't talk about what you said right before when you said that public policy that benefits black folks, it benefits everybody else.
Right.
Even we look at historically, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, it actually didn't just impact the African Americans, it impacted everyone else. But talk about that, because so many people have only clipped that one part without understanding the public policy implications.
So so civil rights acts passed specifically for black people that were over time reappropriated or rebranded into policy that would ultimately help others is not the same as, I'm not going to do anything to help black people, but black people will benefit from that things that I do for everybody, which is no different than a rebranding that Obama had already begun to do in '08 of Reagan's trickle down economics. The other flaw here already is that, and since his name is evoked later, Dr. King and others had already become clear that that legislation, that civil rights legislation that Roland Martin says wasn't just for black people and ended up benefiting everybody else, benefited everybody else because it appeased a black bourgeoisie, a white liberal group in class that were, as King was saying, took advantage of all that was being done by the people at the bottom to benefit a handful at the relative top. It was also being used to benefit the state itself as a sort of sports washing version of, political, civil rights washing, or a woke imperium, to Chris Mott's point, of the state taking symbolic steps to appease aggrieved communities within their community and having that be projected internationally as something that demonstrates the US as the liberal capitalist democracy of land of freedom that it claims to have ever always been. So the framing on this is already so disturbed in terms of any form of accuracy, and it is it's abusive. It is a sort of historical abuse and a disrespect of that struggle that Roland Martin would, of course, very articulately claim he is defending.
Too bad. That's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. Right. So you know that I mean, going back even before, but Dr. King was very clear, right? If you have certain policies that recognize, one, that not everybody starts out on the same base. If you have public policy, and I'm talking about economic public policy specifically at this point, but if you have public policy that recognizes historical barriers, and what we need to do then to overcome, first speak truth about them and then overcome them, that in the process of doing that, not only are you directly dealing with the injustices and the legal and procedural barriers that have been focused on Black folks, but by eliminating those barriers, everyone actually benefits, right? And I know that to be true. So my policies include what I know is going to have a profound impact on Black folks around economic policy, but everyone will benefit from them. I intend to create, as president, what I have named an opportunity economy that taps into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people, and then addresses those in a way that recognizes, unlike my opponent who was handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, not everyone has access to those kinds of resources. But when you give people access to those resources, they thrive and we all benefit. Opportunity economy.
So I gotta say, okay. So again, King is mentioned, who in his own lifetime was already very critical of the Civil Rights Act, of the Voting Rights Act. He said that these were the equivalent of rushing the football to the 50-yard line and claiming touchdown. He said that he recognized that capitalism and white supremacy were barriers that were uncircumvented or unsubverted by those policies. And again, he recognized that the only people benefiting from them were the state, white liberals, and the Black bourgeoisie, and all of that at relative levels. I mean, obviously not equally. So then she starts throwing in those words like ambition and opportunity. These are all buzzwords that come out of that. Well, they predated, but are again weaponized in that Nixonian moment, that are just being repeated here again. And as others have pointed out, and I think we should be returning, as much as possible to the issue shouldn't be opportunity; it should be outcome. We want equal outcomes, not equal opportunity, because there is no such thing. And none of the policies she's advocating do anything to undermine any of that. So the reference to King, again, who said, quite in contradiction to her small business claims and others and Black capitalist claims, said that does not work. He is very clear. I've covered this repeatedly. But it's in Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. He is explicit in saying Black business and buying Black are insufficient. We need massive federal involvement, not home loans and small business loans and claims of an opportunity economy. That's not what he was talking. He's talking about massive billions of dollars of investment in creating a set of equal opportunity, equal outcomes, not opportunity. But this is just all a complete bastardization, and it would be more. It would just, I know that, I guess they can't do it. They can't be honest, but it would just be more honest. This has always been, it's a recurrent issue for me. Just admit you're not King. You're not Malcolm. You love and respect them. And with all due love and respect, you're doing something else. You're be Ron Walters, who, again, to his credit, said, I respect them. I'm not them. I'm Democratic Party kind of guy. I love black people, but I'm a Democratic Party policy kind of guy. So that's where I'm at. I'm not doing anti-capitalism, anti-colonialism. I'm not doing revolution. I'm not doing even what I understand to be Dr. King's politics, which are much more close to that. Just do that. But they don't do that. They keep falsely wrapping themselves in these people and their arguments and their struggles and doing exactly what King in his lifetime said he didn't want done, which is to have the black bourgeoisie take credit for his struggle, or the struggle that he was nominally in charge, or the head of.
That's why I say I'm going to make sure that we give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance.
Useless.
Because again, we know that when you look at the history of how Black folks have been denied the opportunity for home ownership, be it redlining or what we know it's still been happening around a bias in home appraisals, that it is a barrier to achieving intergenerational success. But when we address it by doing things like helping folks get their foot in the door with a down payment assistance, they will have the ability to be on that track of intergenerational wealth building. My plan for extending and expanding the child tax credit, $6,000 for the first year of a child's life. Because our parents, just like any parent, have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources
None
to
of
do
this
that.
is going to help.
So $6,000 in the first year of your child's life helps you buy that car seat or crib or the clothes that are necessary to build the foundation for that important phase of their development that gets them on the right track.
I do want to do the housing piece, because what I think is not being talked about.
Yeah, this one right here is
The
wild.
building of new housing stock.
Yes.
And so because of the home foreclosure crisis, we literally built under 9 or 10 million homes in 2020. We're underbuilt now as well. The fewest homes being built since the 1940s.
Yes.
So a huge part of this problem with housing is that we don't have the stock. So talk about that piece there, because you got demand, but you don't actually have right now the available homes.
All right, we gotta stop that. This part was bizarre to me. The question, the setup alone, before we even get to her answer, the setup alone is ridiculous. He just said there's too many homes and not enough demand for the homes. Now, this goes unexplained by either of them, and I'm sure he would want us to believe that he's talking about the fact that actual potential home buyers can't find a place to buy, or aren't there, or don't those who would be considered potential home buyers don't have the initial startup cash to buy all of these millions of homes that are just sitting empty. So I'm happy to be checked on this. I've already made some perhaps insufficiently methodologically prepared comments on methods, but just a little bit from last year, the United Way, National Capital Area. This is not some radical. You know, despite how many homes are in the US, over 580,000 Americans are experiencing homelessness. There are currently 28 vacant homes for every one person experiencing homelessness in the US. So again, I'm sure what would be said to me from Roland or his defenders would be, I'm not talking about the homeless. I'm talking about people who would actually be counted as part of a potential home buying community. Right? I'm sure that's, is that, am I wrong in thinking that that's what he would say, or his defenders would say? But shouldn't the issue be a reframing of the point around housing, away from a silly $25,000 loan that's going to only lock you in at best to a 30-year mortgage, or the fact that we have plenty of space for people who need places to live. What we need is for some policy that puts them in it. Why are we talking about 25,000 home loans, a $6,000 tax, this, that, and the third? If you have all of these people, and then here you could say, like, this is not based on race. So you could say, I'm doing this for everybody. So that was one thing. The other thing I went back to, because I remember, being a member myself of the Poor People's Army, that this is something that Sherry Honkala and them are always dealing with. So I just went to the poorpeoplesarmy.org. Maybe Kamala and them could swing on through and just check this out just a little bit. And I know this is Jill Stein. I'm just saying, but just a little bit of, it's framing the issue in a I think an important way, given what we're just heard from Roland Martin, and before we hear from Kamala.
Everything that they talk about is about money, 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 but they release no resources into the communities. We can't breathe when we have poor people who are put outside of their homes, who don't have resources, who don't have access to health care or anything like that. I can't breathe because of that. I can't breathe when they're using my taxpaying dollars to fund the war that I don't agree with. We got the Miss Jill Stein here that's got a policy, that's got a program, that's got actual things that she's going to be able to implement as president.
My name is Jill Stein. I am the Green Party candidate for president, and I'm here to lift up the voices of the people. This is the real convention. It's not just Donald Trump, who is a threat to our democracy, who is a fascist threat. It is the Democratic Party as well. Trump interferes typically after the election, and Democrats typically interfere in advance of the election. Some people say that, but the Democrats are the solution to fascism. They're actually not. They are the cause. And let me tell you how that is. Because you had Bill Clinton implementing NAFTA, which sent lots of jobs overseas. You had Barack Obama, who was passing the Wall Street bailouts, which bailed out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars, while ordinary homeowners got thrown out of their homes. The long and short of it is that about 30 million people have lost their jobs over the last 30 years. Lots of it due to Democratic policies.
We must be stronger, more determined, and more committed to saving America.
That is what drives the surge to the right, when people are insecure and then they're goaded into demonizing others, and it becomes a game of divide and conquer.
Here in America, we only have Americans. We don't need to be a country dominated by foreign illegal immigrants.
Sorry, I don't want you here.
And you're demonizing immigrants, which is a lot of, what the right wing typically does. Democrats are driving those policies. Furthermore, it's the Democrats who are funding the most extreme Republicans.
We will make America great again.
This may sound kind of crazy. It actually is very crazy. You may have heard of the Pied Piper strategy, which was how Donald Trump was lifted up by the Hillary Clinton press contacts, who lifted up Trump thinking that he would be the easiest Republican to beat because he was the most extreme. But actually he wasn't. But meanwhile, they put a lot of money into him. In 2022, they're still using that game plan, and they spent in 2022 in the midterms $50 million funding the most extremist Republican candidates for Senate and Congress.
What at first glance looks like a typical campaign message for a Republican primary candidate is actually an ad paid for by Democrats.
Democrat serve is responsible for the content of this ad.
It's part of a national strategy. Official Democratic campaign arms and outside groups are pumping millions of dollars into Republican contests in at least 7 states, betting that Trump-faithful, election-denying candidates will be less competitive in November.
So they help launch the careers of very extreme Republicans because they'll be easier to beat in the general. But in the meantime, they launch the political careers of real extremists.
So again, I'll put the link to the Poor People's Army, but it's poorpeoplesarmy.org, and that's right on the front page there. You can catch that at your convenience and learn more about that. But my point again is well, one, the Roland Martin's framing of that question is so odd. So again, he's talking at best. He's either talking about the black bourgeoisie, who are the only ones likely to be able to buy homes that are he's saying now vacant or unpurchased, which is again also demonstrating a preference for the concern of developers over people, because it's a concern for those who's going to buy our empty houses. If people don't have any money or don't have that $25,000 startup. But then it's also ignoring this issue of houselessness and people who are living in precarious situations on a day-to-day basis when there's apparently plenty of homes. And then, of course, we've seen reported, I think Sherry said it when she was on with us, whenever that was last time, that $20 billion takes care of all the houselessness. And we see more money and interest being spent by Democrats on defeating third-party candidates and defending themselves against right-wing lunatics than we see actual development or investment in people's needs or community. So this is all right.
You actually presented the point the way you did, because let's also go back to what you know in my history on this in terms of being Attorney General.
Presented the point.
When I took on the big banks, and because they were doing predatory lending, and a lot of the folks who were targeted with that predatory lending were Black folks who are being told, oh, you don't need to worry about it. We're going to give you this money. And so you can buy a home without actually doing the analysis to figure out if they'd be able to afford to pay it back, right? And folks trusted the banks that if you're going to loan me the money, then you must have determined I have the ability to actually, right, be able to see it through. And the foreclosure rates for Black homeowners during that crisis,
53% of Black wealth wiped out.
That's exactly right, Roland. I took on and sued the big banks and ended up delivering.
But more importantly, 53%, to the extent that that's an accurate number, 53% of Black wealth is defined as wealth based on having a mortgage. This is, again, part of the problem I was talking about with the buying power methodology and all this other stuff. You're reporting Black wealth as being wrapped up in home ownership, in owning homes that are not yet paid off, that can be foreclosed upon and people thrown out of. So what are we doing calling that wealth in the first place? Now you're using that loss of wealth as a way to justify Kamala coming back in and doing more of the same. Getting someone in with a handful of people with a $25,000 loan to take on another debt that they may or may not be able to pay off, or more importantly, doesn't matter because it's a debt that they have to pay off.
$20 billion for the homeowners of California. The former President Obama recently mentioned the fact that I actually took on the Department of Justice and the administration, saying, I'm not going to do a deal that brings crumbs to the table.
But not just when you're Attorney General, because even right now, the DOJ, Civil Rights Division, the redlining lawsuits, mortgage discrimination.
We have been taking all of it on. Mortgage discrimination, also discrimination in home appraisals. We've taken on the fact that, you know, those stories about a Black family is trying to get their home appraised. They want to get a second mortgage, they want to sell the house, whatever. And they bring in the appraiser. The appraiser looks around, looks at the family pictures, and appraises it for less than it's worth. The family knows that. They're not stupid.
All right, hold on. Let me move this ahead. This is, let me just get to this one last part here.
That because it's a former president and running to be president again who is constantly fanning the flames of hate and division in our country. Constantly.
You often asked about Israel, Gaza, Ukraine. I never hear it come up conversations about Africa. You traveled there. Fastest growing, 6 of the top 10 fastest growing economies. Very young continent. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks complain about Chinese investment. But in terms of your presidency dealing with the continent in those countries, what will that look like? Because that's the future of this world when you look at, again, those economies. And I've been to several countries and those presidents are saying, hey, we want to be able to.
You came with me. Come on now.
Well, no, I didn't go that trip, but if you win, I'll go on the next one.
Well, let me tell you. So this has been, you're preaching to the choir. I've been, listen, I believe so strong.
Just so, though she didn't know who was and was not on that trip, apparently, the point is it's embedded journalism. That's the point.
And that is part of the work I've done as vice president, that we've got to change the narrative around the relationship between the United States and the continent of Africa. For a long time, it has been one that has been about aid as opposed to partnership.
Or investment, right.
Partnership.
Yep.
Which includes U.S. investment. So the work I've done as vice president has been to begin to change that relationship, and including the delegation that I took to the continent, which was focused on, I brought billions of dollars and have worked on billions of dollars of U.S. investment in the continent and in countries on the continent of Africa, looking at what we need to do around. Also, I've been partnering with technology companies around digital inclusion, so ensuring that folks have access to fintech, to financial banking and sectors. But to your point, the median age on the continent is 19. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be on the continent of Africa. That is so exciting. If we see it in terms of global policy, for the opportunity it presents to invest in partnership and to do the work that is about understanding the mutual benefit.
So just and again, I'll put the link so you can check me. I did watch it initially at 2x speed, so maybe I missed the depth, the in-depth discussion they had of AFRICOM, of the Sahel and uprisings there, and why that some people think that those uprisings are necessary. But none of that is brought up. He doesn't ask about any of that. He doesn't ask about, obviously, the Democratic Party's complicity in supporting AFRICOM or the previous colonial regimes and relationships held between these countries in Africa and the rest of the world. And again, I just love that, the willingness to be embedded on a continental trip. The premier Black news outlet on a trip with the president is just bananas. So, now, again, the person who sent this to me said in their email that their primary concern was when Kamala says she's not going to do anything particular for Black people, that he fears that we're moving farther away from reparations. And again, that's not a non-goal for me, but it's not high up on the agenda. And again, the politics and the movements that would be required to get reparations from this country, we might as well, by that level of organization, we might as well get way more than that. If a movement is built to change this country's politics to where it would offer reparations just to Black people here, descendants of the process of enslavement here, it suggests to me that there's a level of organization that would likely demand more than that, maybe even become more militant. But we're so far away from that. This is clearly not that. And maybe worse is that the people who would be in position, and maybe that's why they're in position to raise questions, they're not raising these questions. So that's why we do it here and in these satellites of spaces. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.